For over 2 centuries, the Langridge family awoke to the same unthinkable nightmare. Every daughter, without fail, would die at dawn on her 18th birthday. No matter where they were, at home, traveling, even hiding, the first light of day claimed them. Was it a hereditary illness, a calculated curse, or something no one dared to name? This is the macabre history of the Langridges. The Langridge family once stood as a symbol of wealth and aristocratic power, their vast estate dominating the countryside and their lineage carefully recorded in thick leather-bound genealogies. They hosted lavish gatherings, controlled trade routes, and were regarded as untouchable pillars of prestige. Yet, behind the grandeur lay a shadow that no amount of riches could erase, a terror that struck with clockwork certainty. For centuries, the Langridges carried a chilling legacy. Every daughter born into the family would die at dawn on her 18th birthday. Not in sickness that lingered, not by violence that could be seen, simply, inexplicably, at the first light of day. Entire generations were marked by funerals instead of celebrations, and each new birth brought not joy but dread. This is why the Langridge name remains whispered even now, centuries later. It is not remembered for its wealth or influence, but for a curse, or fate, that turned privilege into horror and left behind one of the most disturbing legends in the region's history. The earliest records of the Langridge tragedy date back to the mid-1700s. Family journals describe the death of Eliza Langridge, a vibrant young woman who was to inherit part of the estate. On the morning of her 18th birthday, she was found lifeless in her bed just as the first rays of sunlight touched her room. There were no wounds, no signs of illness, only an expression of sudden, frozen fear on her face. At first, the Langridges searched for rational explanations. Physicians examined her body, suggesting a hidden ailment of the heart or a rare seizure. Yet no clear cause was found. When, years later, Eliza's younger cousin, Margaret, died the same way, at dawn, on her 18th birthday, panic replaced denial. As decades passed, similar deaths continued to occur, each one identical in its timing and strangeness. After the 3rd, 4th, and 5th losses, there was no longer any doubt within the family. Something beyond medicine, beyond coincidence, was at work. As the pattern of deaths became impossible to dismiss, the Langridge family shifted from disbelief to desperation. Each generation lived beneath the same shadow. The moment a daughter was born, her 18th birthday became a countdown rather than a milestone. Elaborate precautions were planned years in advance, but none could break the chain. When a daughter neared the cursed age, she was placed under constant watch. Families locked them inside windowless rooms, hoping to keep out the first light of dawn. Guards were stationed through the night, and physicians stood ready with treatments in case the deaths were caused by some unknown medical crisis. Some daughters were even moved far from the Langridge estate, hidden in foreign cities with false names. Yet still, when the clock struck dawn on their 18th birthday, they were found lifeless. It didn't matter if they were surrounded by people, sealed in darkness, or miles away from the family home. The result was always the same: silence at sunrise, another daughter gone, and a family left paralyzed by grief and terror. As the deaths mounted, the surrounding villages began to weave their own explanations. Stories that mixed fear, superstition, and fragments of history. Some claimed that centuries earlier, a Langridge ancestor had wronged a powerful figure, a healer, perhaps, or someone rumored to be a witch. According to these tales, that person cursed the bloodline so that no daughter shall greet the morning light. Others spoke of a darker bargain. They whispered that the Langridges' early wealth came from a forbidden pact, land taken unjustly, or a ritual that demanded a life in exchange for prosperity. The deaths of the daughters, they said, were simply the debt being collected, generation after generation. More unsettling still were those who believed the land itself had become tainted. The sprawling Langridge estate, they said, was hungry. It demanded a life at each cycle, and if it was denied its victim, something worse might awaken. Even those who dismissed such stories avoided the property at dawn, unwilling to test whether the soil itself remembered the blood it was owed. By the late 19th century, the Langridges had grown desperate enough to try anything to break the cycle. Some branches of the family fled England entirely, settling in distant countries under new names, convinced that leaving the ancestral estate would end the deaths. Others went further, cutting all ties to their lineage, hiding their daughters' identities, and raising them as if the Langridge name had never existed. Yet even abroad, the same chilling pattern emerged. A girl who had never seen the manor, who had never even heard of the so-called curse, would be found dead on the morning she turned 18. Her body untouched, her expression frozen in the same inexplicable terror. At the same time, early scientists and physicians became fascinated by the phenomenon. They documented family trees, conducted examinations, and tested theories of rare genetic disorders, undiagnosed seizures, and even environmental toxins. Nothing they discovered could explain the timing, the consistency, or the absence of any physical cause. Every attempt to outwit fate, distance, secrecy, medicine, failed. No matter where a Langridge daughter lived, dawn always found her. The last recorded Langridge daughters were sisters, Amelia and Rose, born in the early 1900s. As their 18th birthdays approached, the family's fear reached its peak. Determined to end the cycle, the Langridges took extreme measures. They sealed the girls in an underground chamber beneath the estate, guarded day and night, and surrounded by doctors, clergy, and armed men. For the first time in generations, the family dared to hope they might finally defy their fate. That hope ended the moment the first dawn arrived. When the chamber was opened, both sisters were found lifeless, their faces pale but unmarked, their eyes wide as if they had seen something unspeakable in the darkness. After Amelia and Rose, the surviving Langridge relatives abandoned the estate entirely. Some changed their names, others vanished without a trace. The once magnificent manor was left to decay, its windows boarded and gates rusting shut. Over the decades, the abandoned house became infamous. Locals claimed that at sunrise, faint cries echoed from its upper floors, or worse, laughter. Some swore they had seen ghostly figures of young women standing in the windows, waiting for the first light of day. Today, the Langridge Manor is a hollow shell. Its roof has partially collapsed, ivy climbs the cracked stone walls, and shattered windows gape like empty eyes. Yet despite its ruin, locals refuse to go near it, especially at dawn. Some roads in the area remain unmarked, deliberately steering travelers away. Children grow up hearing the same warning: don't be near the Langridge grounds when the sun comes up. Ghost stories have kept the legend alive. Witnesses claim to hear faint screams or sudden bursts of crying carried on the morning wind. Others report seeing silhouettes of young women standing motionless in the broken windows, vanishing the instant sunlight touches the glass. What makes the tale so disturbing is its persistence. Even skeptics admit there's something unsettling about a tragedy so consistent, so precise, and so unexplained. The Langridge curse, or whatever it was, turned a wealthy family's legacy into a chilling reminder that some fears are not buried by time. The Langridge story endures because it blends history, tragedy, and the unknown into something people can't quite dismiss. Whether it was a genetic condition no one understood, a series of murders buried beneath wealth and influence, or a genuine curse that shadowed the family for centuries, the pattern is undeniable, and that's what keeps it alive as more than just a tale. Legends like this remind us how fear and secrecy can outlast even the families that created them. They become warnings, whispered in the dark, shaping how entire communities see the land around them. What do you think? Were the deaths of the Langridge daughters the result of science we couldn't yet explain, a deliberate crime hidden as fate, or something far more supernatural? Share your theories in the comments, and if you want to hear more histories that blur the line between fact and nightmare, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for the next story.